At this point, I'd like to call to order
the agenda packet.
May 1st, 2018 meeting of the Natural Resources Board. And if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point, if we could have the roll call, please.
I didn't get a day, wasn't. So.
Ms. Mosblick?
Here.
Mr. Gordian is excused or just not present?
Unexcused as far as I know.
Okay, all right. Ms. Glazer? Here. Mr. Van Hoffman? Mr. Stadelman?
Here.
Mr. O'Neill?
Here.
Thank you.
At this point, I just want to confirm we do have a quorum, right? Okay. Okay, if we can move to the approval of the minutes from the April 3rd, 2018 meeting.
Motion to approve minutes? Oh, second. Yeah, both of us.
Okay. Can we do a voice approval? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay, moving on to the announcements for the open positions for the Natural Resources Board. And I guess we'll move to our guest speaker. We have Ms. Stephanie Fonville from the Indian River County Solid Waste Disposal District. Thank you for coming, Stephanie.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. As I said, my name is Stephanie. I am the recycling coordinator for the county. I work for the county. I do the recycling marketing and education for the county, so I do all the advertising. I also do presentations. I go to schools and give presentations. I talk about commercial recycling. Pretty much any questions you may have about recycling, that would be me. I will try to address it. But today, at the board's request, I'm going to focus specifically on commercial recycling, some of the challenges that they may be facing, maybe some of the solutions that we can help them with, some of the benefits of commercial recycling. So that's what I'm going to focus on a little bit today. And of course, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask me during the presentation. I love conversational presentations. So. First, I did want to start with just the importance of reduce, reuse, and recycle, the 3 R's. So hopefully you've all heard the importance of reduce, reuse, and recycle. It saves natural resources, it saves energy, it saves landfill space. These are some very, very important reasons to recycle. But another one that's not talked about quite as much that I just wanted to touch on is this idea of changing the perception of waste in our community. So for people to change their behavior, they have to change the way that they think about waste. So currently, as Floridians, as Americans, as human beings, we have a very disposable perception of waste. Waste is exactly that, it's waste. We have single-use plastic bags, shopping bags, utensils. Single use is something that is very, very common, very, very accepted, and people don't think twice about it. What we want to do is we want to change this perception. We want to develop a culture of recycling, is what I call it. Essentially changing the way that we see waste. For reduce, reuse, and recycle, we want to see waste as unnecessary. We want to change this idea that this disposable mentality is very common, it's very normal. We want to change that. That's what the concept of reducing our waste does. Reuse and recycle, we see waste as a useful commodity. It's something that we can turn into something else that's useful. So what we have right now may not be useful. We change it into something that is. So in order to see a changed community, you really have to change the perception that people have of their waste, of what they're throwing away. So I think that's something that's really important when you're talking about residential and commercial. Pretty much any time you're talking about recycling, it's really important to change that perception. That's where you're going to get the change in behavior. So I'm going to switch gears for a second and talk a little bit more about recycling for businesses. One of the questions I get is, how does that work in Indian River County? One of the questions I've addressed a lot is people will come up to me and they'll say, I'm confused as to why commercial businesses have to recycle or have to pay for recycling, but residential homes don't. I get that question a lot. That is not an entirely accurate statement. We at our residential homes, it's not that we don't pay for recycling. We actually pay for our recycling services through what's called the solid waste assessment fee. This is an annual fee that we pay to the county every year that covers the disposal of garbage. Once it leaves your house, it has to go somewhere. So this fee covers the disposal of that garbage. It covers the operation of the landfill, containing it, making sure nothing is leaking out into the environment. But your solid waste assessment fee also includes recycling services, so your pickup services at your home. It also covers the use of those customer convenience centers, those drop-off locations. So we pay that solid waste assessment fee to basically cover all of those services. Commercial businesses, commercial buildings are a little bit different. They do pay a solid waste assessment fee, but recycling services are not included in that fee. They don't pay for recycling pickup through that fee, nor do they pay for those customer convenience centers, because those convenience centers are strictly for residential use. So when people are asking, why don't commercial businesses pay for recycling, or why do they have to pay for recycling? As residents, we do pay for it. So commercial businesses, they essentially have the option. So now it's up to the business to decide whether commercial or whether recycling is important for their business or not. So it's a very important distinction to make. Sure.
Why is the fee lower for commercial buildings? I would think that,
Okay, yep, I put the values in there just to kind of make a point. So the waste generation units are essentially, the county will predict about how much material a building will produce. So for a single family home, it's about 1.6 is a waste generational unit for them. It depends on the building, so a commercial business will be different. So we have actually an employee that her full-time job is to figure out what those assessment fees are. But here in the residential homes, that $68 per waste residential or waste generation unit, that covers, like I said, the pickup services, the recycling pickup services, and the convenience centers. Okay. The reason the commercial businesses is lower is because those two
are not included.
Expenses are not included.
Right.
So they're both paying for the disposal of garbage and for basically the landfill to operate. But it's in the residential homes, they're also paying for that pickup service.
Okay.
Yep, and that commercial business, customer convenience centers. Good, thank you. So reasons to recycle in commercial businesses. We already talked about the environmental benefits, the benefits of changing that perception. It's really important in commercial businesses because once you go out into the community and you see everyone recycling, it really starts to change people's perception and that they expect to see it. They expect to go to a park and see recycling. They expect to go to a business and see recycling. So the more parks and the more businesses and the more entities that we get to recycle, the more people kind of grow to expect it, and they ask for it, especially kids. Kids will ask for it. I've been working in the schools a little bit, and they'll ask me those questions. So another reason to recycle in commercial businesses, if you've heard that the state of Florida actually has a recycling goal of reaching a 75% recycling rate by the year 2020. So that means of everything that we generate in Indian River County, their goal is to have 75% of that go to recycling and be reused, and only 25% of that going into the garbage. That's the goal. Right now, we are at about a 53% recycling rate. So that includes commercial businesses, single-family homes, businesses like scrap companies, construction companies, basically anything that's generated in Indian River County. So commercial businesses, obviously, they generate a lot of material. So it really would be a benefit for those commercial businesses to jump on board and recycle so that we can get closer to this goal. The other thing is that the Florida legislature has a lot of opportunities right now to help entities recycle. They're very interested in reaching this goal, so there are grant opportunities, there are educational opportunities. You have folks like me who are educators. I will go to a commercial business and basically help them set up recycling or answer any questions that they have. So there's a lot of resources, especially right now, available to them. Another reason for commercial businesses to recycle, the idea of green living, going green, is becoming very popular. So what this means is that people love good causes. If a commercial business is recycling or goes for green practices, that can actually be used as an advertising tool for them, a way to encourage people to use their business. And a lot of businesses go that route. So that's another possibility, a good reason for them to recycle. The switch to single stream that we did in October of 2015, this really makes it a lot easier now to implement a recycling program. Instead of needing 2 recycling containers, you can mix all your plastics and your glass and your paper all into one bin. You only need 1. So this means if you're going to start up a program, you have lower costs and it takes up less space because now you only need 1 container as opposed to 2. So it's a good time for commercial businesses to basically jump on board. And then the most important one, I think, is commercial recycling. It's an open market for businesses. So, for example, in Indian River County, we have a franchised garbage hauler. So if you live in unincorporated Indian River County, or your business is in an unincorporated Indian River County, we have a franchise garbage company. You have to use that garbage company. For recycling, that's not the case. Recycling is an open market. You can use any company that hauls recycling, anyone that you want to. What that does is it creates a competitive market. So all these businesses are basically competing for your business. So you can look at one recycling company, you can get their prices, you can compare it to another company, get their prices, and pick the one that's best suited for you. So it is an open market.
Is that again priced by the generating unit? Is that pricing done that way?
Now we're talking about private companies. So
Right.
in this case, the waste generation unit, that had to do with the solid waste assessment fee that you pay to the county. It's basically a fee that as residents we pay to the county as property owners. Now for commercial recycling being an open market, now we're talking about the actual service for a private company to come to your business and pick up your recycling.
And is that done on an individual basis with the company on a negotiated basis?
Yes. So basically, the company will have their set prices. So they'll say, okay, for an 8-yard container, it costs this much. For a 6-yard container, it costs this much. And a different company could have a different price. So now you're going out into the market and saying, I want this service, and getting quotes and figuring out which one works best. So now you're in the realm of private companies. Does that make sense?
It does. It's a little bit confusing. I'm just thinking in terms of the business owner, you know, how many quotes does he have to call around to get? Or is there, do you have a table or something like this that is referenceable?
Well, as the county, we are actually not allowed to recommend any companies because we don't want to compromise their business practices. So I intentionally don't know what the prices are. Okay. I know there are several companies that do recycling hauling in Indian River County. There's just a couple that I know of. Waste Management does recycling services. Republic Services, also called Treasure Coast, they do recycling hauling. I believe Waste Pro is over in Indian River Shores. Those are just ones that are actively working in Indian River County. But there could also be a small business that does recycling hauling down the road, and you can go to them and have them haul your recycling. It's whoever has a company that will pick up recycling, you are more than welcome to use. That's how that works.
Is this the reason that the recycling is not included in the assessment fee for businesses, because they wanted to keep it as a market?
Yes, there is an ordinance that essentially means that, or says that recycling for commercial businesses has to be an open market. So as the county, we can't say, okay, we're going to pay for commercial recycling services, and now commercial businesses have to pay for it. So it'll never be included in the solid waste assessment fees just because the ordinance prevents us from doing that. It gets really confusing, so I'm glad you guys are asking questions.
What is the reason behind that? For just the liability issue?
I'm not entirely sure. I know there is a state ordinance that essentially wants to keep it an open market. So that's kind of what prevents the county from stepping in. So for a residential home, for your home, we pay the recycling hauler. Waste Management is the contracted franchise for Indian River County. We pay them to pick up recycling for everyone in Indian River County. So residents will pay this assessment fee to the county, and then we in turn will pay for everybody's recycling in the county. They don't do that with commercial businesses because we can't pick a company, we can't take away that choice from the commercial businesses to choose who to do their recycling. Does that make sense? So, so if there was any type of mandatory recycling ordinance that was created, essentially what that would mean is that the company would have to find a business would have to find a recycling company to pick up their recycling. We couldn't pay for it and then put that in their assessment fee. They would physically have to call and contact a recycling company and set that up themselves. That's why enforcement would be key to that type of program, because they basically need to have somebody going around and making sure they're doing that. Otherwise, you don't know what they're doing, whether they're doing that or not. So, so here it is an open market. What that means is a lot of times the recycling pickup services are cheaper than the garbage services. So this is something a lot of commercial businesses don't realize, but there's actually an opportunity for cost savings by basically changing their garbage service. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that a company has an 8-yard garbage container that's being picked up twice a week, and I just threw an arbitrary number out there. I said about $350 a month for an 8-yard container of garbage being picked up once a week, or twice a week. If they chose to add a 2-yard recycling container, then that would be picked up once a week, then essentially it's the same amount of material that they're generating, you're just now diverting some of it to recycling. So you shouldn't have as much garbage. You can reduce the size of the garbage container, which is cheaper. So now if you have a 6-yard garbage container that's picked up twice a week, plus a 2-yard recycling container that's picked up once a week, well, that's about $310. So you can actually save money that way. So in some cases, you can save money by adding recycling. In other cases, people will think, well, I'm already paying $350 for garbage. I don't want to pay $350 for recycling as well. Well, that's not how it would work out. You would change the size of it. You can either change the dumpster size, you can change the frequency of pickup. If you're a restaurant that has to be picked up every day and you have an 8-yard container, if you're generating like a lot of cardboard boxes, you could essentially get a 6-yard container for recycling, reduce your garbage down to 2, still have that picked up every day, but now you've just cut your costs by quite a bit. So this is something the garbage companies will actually help you with. So if you call them and you sit down and you look at your waste stream, you look at what your company is generating, if you realize you're generating a lot of cardboard boxes, they take up a lot of space. Containers fill up really fast. So if you divert that to recycling, it's very clean, doesn't really need to be picked up that often. You can cut your costs a little bit by doing that. So this is very, very dependent on the business, what they generate, what their waste stream looks like, what they're putting in their garbage. So this is very specific to the company. So they have to basically sit down, take a look at what they're generating, what their garbage is, and see how they can fit in recycling. But it really can save them money. So it's worth the effort. It's worth looking into. And this is something too, I haven't done this a whole lot, but this is something too that you call me up and I will come out there and take a look at it with you and help you figure out how to collect recycling. That's what I do. So never be afraid to give me a call. I have my business cards in the back. So the last thing I did want to talk about a little bit is there are some practical challenges and concerns that businesses have. So it's great for them to recycle. They may be able to save some money, but there are some legitimate concerns and challenges that they have to overcome. One of those is an enclosure ordinance. There is an enclosure ordinance in Indian River County that essentially says all dumpsters need to be enclosed on all sides. So for some companies, they have a garbage container that's enclosed. If you added a recycling dumpster, that needs to be an enclosure as well. And that can incur costs, and it can also incur space problems. So that is a very legitimate issue that needs to be looked at. So some of the suggestions that I came up with, again, this depends on the company, but see if anything will fit in the existing enclosure. If it's big enough and you downsize your garbage, you might be able to fit a recycling container in there. The other thing is that recycling carts are available for commercial businesses, and they do not need to be in an enclosure. They are not a dumpster, so they are allowed to be on the outside of that dumpster. They're also movable, so you can move around. Yes?
I would like to add that there is currently a grant that could potentially cover half of a business's enclosure costs for the CRA, which is most of the businesses along the riverside in Sebastian.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, thank you. Well, we'll put that under suggestions then. So that's really great. And also, as I mentioned too, there may be grant opportunities just through the Florida legislature that might help them with this. I don't know what they have out there, but it's always worth looking into. So there may be ways to get around the costs of that. Another challenge would be space issues. It's kind of dances along the same line there. I had one plaza that was very small, and they really didn't have a place to put a dumpster for each of their businesses. So one of the suggestions we had was basically you can have, if you're in a plaza like that, you can have multiple businesses that are sharing a single dumpster. So it's basically the property manager gets a recycling dumpster for all the businesses within that plaza, and now you only need one instead of one for each business. So that helps with space issues. And again, the recycling carts, they're movable, so you can always put them somewhere, and then when the garbage company or the recycling company comes to pick up your recycling, you can wheel them out to wherever they need to be, have them picked up, and wheel them back out of the way. So that helps a little bit with space issues. The idea of additional costs, as I mentioned, sometimes commercial businesses are reluctant to add that additional service, but as we talked about, there's that cost savings, right sizing option. Also, for some businesses that are in, let's say, an office, there may be a cost associated with purchasing indoor containers. So you want a recycling container at each person's desk, there's going to be a cost associated with that. Again, there may be grants for that, and as we talked about, the single stream program allows for less containers, so it lowers that cost a little bit. So again, the timing now is better than it was a couple years ago when we had dual stream. And then other concerns and challenges, additional work for the custodial staff. I've heard that a number of times, or people using it improperly, basically putting garbage in the recycling bin and vice versa. So that's where education can come in, signs can come in, presentations, as I mentioned. I'm very, very happy to go to commercial businesses, talk to the employees, talk to the staff. I have signage that they can use. I can develop signs as well, posters that they can put around. As for the additional work for the custodial staff, I actually helped to implement a pilot recycling program at some of the schools. And to help the custodial staff, one of the things that we purchased was, it's called a duo dolly. I think I have a picture. Yes. It basically is a little cart that you could attach a garbage and recycling container. They just push around one container, and it's still the same amount of material. You put garbage in one side, recycling the other, and it takes the same amount of time, and it's essentially the same job. It helps keep that from exploding into additional work. So I followed one of the gentlemen around the custodial staff at the school, showed him how to use it, what the idea was, and he loved it. So there's at least one positive story there. So these are some of the challenges and concerns. They're legitimate and they really need to be addressed. So if you want to implement a commercial recycling, there has to be a way to kind of help them navigate through these challenges, or just at least tell them that it's there and how they might be able to overcome them. So that was my, my 2 cents about commercial recycling. If you guys have any questions, please ask, give me a call, see how I can help.
The recycle, the actual bins that do not have to go in the enclosure, those are going to be provided by whoever they contract with?
Yes. Some companies have those.
And are they complimentary, or do they come with the service, or is there a rental for the recycled bins as well? Do you know?
As far as I understand, it's basically included in the service. So if you say I want an 8-yard container, or if you say I want 3 recycling carts, then they'll essentially say this is the cost to just pick up the 3 recycling carts. So I don't think that there is an additional charge for those carts. It's just included in the pickup cost. I believe that's how that works.
What is an action item that we can do?
Honestly, I think reaching out to these commercial businesses and even telling them about the cost savings opportunity, I think is a big, big key. There's only one of me, so trying to run around and tell everybody about it. I am hoping to perhaps do some mailers or some advertising campaigns that specifically targets those businesses, but if there's any way to tell them how they can overcome some of these challenges, and the fact that it might actually save them money depending on what they're generating, I think that would be really, really great. And also targeting commercial businesses where you really think that there's going to be a positive impact. So companies that may generate a lot of cardboard boxes. I actually drove past one commercial business, and I just saw cardboard boxes sticking out of their dumpster, and I thought that might be a good place to go and talk to. So just focusing on the folks that you really think it would help. I think that's the whole goal. We want them to recycle, but we also want it to be beneficial and helpful for them as well. So focusing on those companies that can actually benefit from that cost savings, I think would be a key. Any more questions for me?
I have kind of a practical question. Sure. Just thinking about the landfill and the trash versus the garbage. For our local landfill, are there any estimates on how long we have, or what the lifetime is for this landfill? I mean, could we use that as a motivation to kind of encourage people? I would assume that it would get more expensive to throw away garbage if we have to go elsewhere.
Yes, it is actually very, very expensive to put all the liners and everything in place to build a landfill. So extending the life of a landfill is a very, very important thing because it's a lot cheaper to recycle than it is to build that landfill, I'm sure. So I don't know off the top of my head how the life of the landfill. I know we have multiple, we call them cells. So right now, the landfill that you see when you're driving down 95 and you see that big tall hill, that's one cell that we have closed off and basically have filled up. So now we're extending it out to the side. So I think we have, I think it's about 6 cells maybe. Available. So we have a little bit of time in that space, but each time we open up one of those cells, it's a big cost for the county and ultimately for us as well as residents. So I can find that out for you. And
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. That's what I do. I'll find that out for you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else for me? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. My business cards are in the back, so unfortunately I can't stay, but please, if anyone has any questions or wants to learn more about it, please give me a call. I am available. So, all right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Okay. At this point, we'll move to number 7, the public input. If there's anyone from the audience who would like to say anything. If you can, when you're at the microphone, if you don't mind, please telling us your full name and spelling your last name for us, please.
I'm Graham Cox, Graham, COX is the last name. I live at 1213 George Street. I'm here just to say a few words, and it really relates to the new business that you have that follows this, dealing with the landscape ordinance thing. In January, the Pelican Island Audubon Society organized a conference with many sponsors and a lot of help to try to get people to understand that growing grass is not the best thing, that we are better off putting in native plants and landscaping our yards rather than putting in turf. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I won't go into it now. But we, as a result of that conference, are encouraging the county, the city of Vero Beach, Sebastian, and all the communities around us, especially the homeowners associations, to consider changes to their rules, to their ordinances, so that it would encourage people to do something different. And what we have done in the meantime has provide to the city administration, they already had the city ordinance dealing with landscaping and development, provide them with a county ordinance that deals with a similar thing, and with a model ordinance that has been developed by several folks in the law school. We can offer, and this is Pelican Island Audubon and the experts that were available in the community, we can offer to help write an ordinance that is less friendly to turf, more friendly to native plants. And there are a lot of experts in the community, including Janice Brody, who's back here, Dr. Baker, who's back here, Robin Polensky, who's just an incredible landscaping lady, and Jane Schnee, who was at your last meeting. So if you want to go about, and I see you do, want to go about redoing the landscape ordinance for the city of Sebastian, we stand ready to help. I am not the expert, but I can help you edit things. I can help you pull in pieces that you want. The experts can tell you what you really should include in it, but there is help, and we are willing to do that. And it's going to take some time. It's not something that you're going to do overnight, but we're willing to do all of that. And so I leave it at that, and when you get to the item on your agenda dealing with landscape ordinance, we're right here to help with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Russell Herman, Herrmann. I reside at 586 Redwood Court, Sebastian, Florida. I am the Vice President of the Friends of St. Sebastian River, and I am representing our board member, James Schnee, this evening. Local governments can derive substantial benefits from promoting and protecting native vegetation that is appropriate to the area. Quote, appropriate native vegetation is vegetation found in the natural community that is suited to the soil, topography, and hydrology of a particular site. The use of appropriate native vegetation in local landscaping can help achieve water conservation goals, preserve habitat in urban areas, greatly reduce maintenance costs for landscaping, and protect property values. The Friends of St. Sebastian River are requesting that you promote an environmentally friendly landscape. If the Friends of St. Sebastian River can be of assistance, please let us know. Thank you very much for your attention to this very important matter.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public input? Okay. Well, I think that leads us into the new business, unless there are any comments or questions. We'll move to new business, which is a good segue. We have the first item up for, the first action item here is our approval to make the native landscaping ordinance a primary focus of our meetings moving forward.
Second the motion.
All those in favor? Oh,
Motion to approve. I second it.
and all those who approve? Aye. Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, the motion has passed. Would we like to have any discussion on how to move forward with the native landscaping ordinances? We received in our, with our agenda materials, the current landscaping ordinances, as well as a model native plant landscape ordinance handbook. I'm assuming this from the Florida Native Plant Society is the one that Mr. Cox was referring to?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I mean, this being the first time that I've kind of overseen or the overview of an existing ordinance, I'm not sure if there's any guidance. I'm not sure if anyone is more familiar with it, but how we kind of move forward, how we can incorporate public input.
It's a lot of material, and we aren't having a meeting next month because we have a public meeting on another agenda in this room. So that gives us, the board, 2 months to review, and I know it's very wordy material, and know that the role of the NRB is to do some compare and contrast and kind of bullet point recommendations and then there's a process for ordinance, so we won't necessarily draft an ordinance. We make the recommendations, and then they move through the P&Z, and they, Planning and Zoning Department, and they follow the procedure to become an ordinance. And our role is to decide, prioritize what we'd like to see changes happen.
What, would this be where the ban on the use of glyphosate from the city would be implemented?
That is not pertaining to the landscaping ordinance, and that is actually an issue for city council, not for the NRB.
From my understanding, from looking through this, it looks to be mostly which plants are suitable, what percentage, how many plants, given a certain size lot, et cetera. From my initial inspection, it looks like we have very few natives and very few exotics that are on this list. I feel like those could probably be expanded to see what we could encourage and discourage. In terms of our recommendations, once planning and zoning receives those, are we involved anymore, or that's kind of the end of our role?
That's basically, that they draft all the verbiage the way it has to be done officially. That's their job. Our job is say we would like this, and then they draft that into official language, and that's Dory Bosworth from Planning and
Hello,
Zoning.
I'm with the Planning and Zoning Department, and a land development code amendment based on, is required to be, the Planning and Zoning Commission will make a recommendation to City Council. Ultimate approval of any recommended changes will go to City Council. I think Kim and our director envisioned that you would be looking at these different ordinances, take the city's ordinance, review the native plant ordinance, the model ordinance. Let us know what you don't like with our ordinances, what you do like, what you would like to see implemented into our ordinance. And I think there'll be a coordination between your board and the Planning and Zoning Commission. There'll be certainly any draft ordinances that's going to go to City Council would come to you for final approval, and the Planning and Zoning Commission, not final approval, but recommendations to City Council. And it may be that you have a different direction in the ordinance that you see from Planning and Zoning Commission. So it may be something that would go to City Council that says the NRB board is recommending this in the ordinance. Planning and Zoning, they're looking more at a lot of the commercial aspects for the new site plans, and that would go to City Council, and they'll ultimately make the final decision. But you would definitely get to see through the process, you'll get to see the drafts, make continuous observations and recommendations also.
I'm just a little confused on, I mean, yeah, we're all saying we want more native plants, but I'm not sure what those are.
You don't have to be specific. When you kind of peruse over and you want to get past the wordy language that's in those ordinances, but when you look at the native recommendations in the folder on one side, and then kind of compare it to the Inver County, which recently modeled their landscape ordinance after that handbook, and then compare ours, it really will give you an idea of where you might feel changes are needed or some things that need to stay that are in line with that. And that doesn't have to be specific for how many inches apart a tree or exactly which species. That's not the specifics. We don't need to focus on that yet.
You don't want me designing stuff, so.
I think working with the ordinance for a long time, I've been here at the city for a while, I think it'd be great if the board can come up to make the ordinance friendly to both residents and the commercial people, the commercial businesses. So right now in the ordinance, you'll see, as I understand it, everybody has the legal right to totally clear cut their property when they're getting ready to build a house. Well, the city would love to see the trees saved, so the ordinance was set up to incentivize that if you did save a tree, that was, you got tree credits. And I think also, though, in the native, in introducing and getting some of the native requirements that you'd like in this ordinance, but to make it easier for the homeowners to do that, to go to the nurseries when they're building their new homes, and what's going to make it easy for them to go there and say, we're going to put this in. If there's either an incentive program or something in the code that incentivizes them to do that, or it just makes it easier for them to get that onto their property. The other aspect to also take into consideration is how are any of the regulations that you would like the city to put into the ordinance, how is it going to be enforced? If it's going to take additional city staff to enforce that, that may be hard to get approved by city council if it's going to create another enforcement person to be going out to these properties to looking to make sure that it's native. So it is hard to, I don't envy you for having to kind of look at these. We keep putting off changing our landscape ordinance because it's hard. Same with the commercial aspects. Usually those commercial new sites, they want to get in. Landscaping is the last on their minds. They don't want to spend a lot of money on landscaping. But what can we put in that ordinance that will either give them credits for something or benefit them if we can show them the benefits to do the native landscaping, xeriscaping, less irrigation, that's going to help them with their landscape plans. But enforcement is also another big issue whenever we create new ordinances or regulations. Who's going to enforce that and what's going to make, we don't want to threaten that, oh, if you don't plant a native plant, we're going to take you before the special magistrate. We certainly don't want it to be a mean-spirited regulation, but something that's going to, if you can come up with the benefits and that it's going to help the homeowner and the sites that are going to make them want to put in native landscaping.
I need a little bit of, I guess, direction here is how do we as a board not violate any rules by sharing ideas, thoughts.
And collaborating.
And collaborate.
Yeah.
Instead of just, you come with the suggestion and who compiles it and then it comes back out. I mean, we're talking a long process then. How do we streamline that?
I'm trying to think, I know you certainly can't talk to each other based on the sunshine law, but as you say for this next meeting that you're going to have in 2 months, if there is ideas or plans or schematics that you would like to send to Kim, then in your next packet, that can all be given to you guys. And you're given that packet a few days before your meeting, so you'll have time to review what everybody else is submitting. And then kind of weed out what ideas you like or which ones you don't think will work generally. But yes, and that's why changing ordinances, especially a whole article on landscaping, it is going to take a few meetings and a few times. You can, once it gets to where you're a little honed in on what you feel as a board you'd like to, you can possibly request a workshop with the Planning and Zoning Commission, so you can maybe be all on board with what you want to present to City Council. But yes, you do have to be careful on discussing it outside of a meeting amongst the board's members.
Saying a public workshop, then could we have a public workshop ourselves with the public and hash out ideas? It's open and advertised?
You kind of have a public meeting here. I mean, certainly staff, the public and they're, this is the point where they would come up and give you ideas. I think this initial was to just get these ordinances to you, to kind of get familiarized with them, and certainly in 2 months, instead of it just being an action item, is just to approve that this is what you want to go forward with, it'll be more of a discussion item on the agenda, and if it takes an hour or however long to discuss what you want, and it would add a public meeting.
I know I'm at the break out a dictionary to interpret this thing, but okay. One thing I've been thinking of lately is I'm not sure that once a month is going to be enough to accomplish what we're going to try to do here. Given that, can we move to once every 3 weeks or something like that? Are we limited to one Tuesday a month?
I believe that's in the resolution that created the NRB board, that it states you meet once a month, but while you're reviewing this, you certainly can request a special meeting, a couple of special meetings. It'll be listed as a special meeting, and Kim will work with the city clerk to see if it can be the same on a Tuesday night, what Tuesdays are available. But you could have 2 or 3 special meetings while you're going through this process.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. This is going to require some additional work on our part. This is a very complex and kind of unwieldy thing here. That my first impression of it is. So I would tend to think that we might want to do that.
Is that something we would need to vote on, or?
I had a suggestion that maybe, I know it's not, I know it's a lot of material, trust me, I printed it out, and I tried to make it take up as little paper as I could, if you see it, like conserved as well as I could. And maybe take it in a section, you know? And I thought maybe if each member can make it a goal, you have 2 months to get like 3 points that you think are strengths or weaknesses between ours and the 2 we're comparing it to, the model and the county. And then I could compile those into a presentation for the next meeting, and then we could have a basis for discussion that based on what everyone has observed. And it doesn't mean you have to comb through all of it, take a section and just pick, you know.
Yes, sir. Can we include public input?
Certainly, yeah, this public meeting, anybody
Okay.
can go up and speak on it.
Sir, if you don't mind coming to the microphone.
I'm Richard Baker, B-A-K-E-R, President of the Pelican Island Audubon Society. It shouldn't be really difficult to do this ordinance. There are a lot of model ordinances out there. You picked a good one from the Native Plant Society, who worked with the University of Florida to put this together about 10 years ago. And I think you all have a copy of that. It kind of helps you move into it. But the Audubon chapter actually wrote the tree ordinance and the landscape ordinance for the Indian River County. And so we've got experts and a little bit of knowledge about how to do this. I don't think we want everybody necessarily to have a whole yard in native plants. What we're trying to do is cut back some of the sod, and ideally maybe like 50%.
Kind of
so
bring
you're
it
saving
down.
on fertilizer, you're saving on water, you're saving on gas, you're saving on CO2 coming out from the motors and things like that. And then have a certain number of native plants. You could have other plants. The University of Florida recommends Florida friendly. I don't really recommend that. I like to have more natives, but when you're starting out, maybe you can start out gradually and it sort of catches on. We're losing half our birds in the next 50 years, species-wise. You know, we're talking about eagles, osprey, common birds that we see. With global warming occurring and the way the development is occurring, we're seeing so much concrete, so many roads. We're losing all our natural All our national parks add up to about 3.4% of our nation. So we depend upon homeowners and to provide the plants and for the butterflies and the birds. Otherwise, we're going to be losing them. So we're willing to help you work on this. And I know you got to worry about the logistics of how you have your meetings and things, but if you want us to sort of help draft up things, we'd be willing to do that. We call in some experts, and then we make a presentation to you. We're trying to get the county to increase theirs. I mean, theirs was done a few years ago. They followed a model ordinance. It was one of the best in the state at the time. But we're realizing now you can improve that a bit after time. So we're going to be helping Indian River County. We want to do the shores and Vero Beach. There's a move now to put natives around the city council building in Vero Beach as an example for people. We'd love to have you think about native plants around this building here or some of your Sebastian buildings too. But we're just trying to get people into it. I wouldn't worry about the enforcement part of it. That's not a big issue, I don't think. We wouldn't have to do that. We want people, their neighbors, to say, oh, look at that. That's really nice. You got some birds coming in there. You got some butterflies coming in there. You don't have all that noise in the morning of grass blowers and lawnmowers at 7:30 in the morning, you know. It'll be kind of quiet and peaceful and nice. So that's what we're moving on towards. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baker.
I'm wondering, is it possible to set up kind of a point person within the board, someone who might be able to coordinate and talk with the organizations to see if, you know, and bring information to the meeting? Or if possible, I mean, we're looking for speakers coming up for the meetings. Is this something we might want to, as a point person, to kind of work with these organizations? Is that something that would be recommended, that is possible to do? I mean, again, this is my first time doing this, so.
A point person that would organize the information coming to you?
Yeah, and essentially set up someone who is kind of the communication kind of between us and these organizations to make sure that the experts are communicating with us and then can kind of get that information to the rest of the board.
Yes,
Right.
that would be, as long as you keep, in fact, though, Kim gets your packet out to you the week before your meeting.
Yeah.
And so if one person organizes that information, that goes to Kim, as long as it wasn't dispersed to other members from the point person. But yes, that would be fine.
And we'd just be able to have one person, right? If we had two of us, then it would be in violation of the, or me separate, okay, yeah, but that would be redundant.
The Audubon Society has recommends a different thing than the Lee County landscape ordinance, or is it modified? Do we know? On the Audubon Society, do you guys recommend the Lee County ordinance, or do you have another? The Native Plant Society.
That's what we have here.
Okay, perfect. This one.
Yeah.
This one?
The landscape ordinance handbook.
No, this is the invasive plant
Yeah.
species. Oh, this one, okay. This one.
Yeah, Brian, if you look at the native landscape ordinance handbook that we were given, I think it provides a good model for how you can kind of read through this and compare it then to what we have existing.
Okay.
And I think from there, we could kind of, like was said, come up with our priorities, what we think is positive versus negative, and kind of discuss that.
And I apologize, just to question what the point person is, because the information certainly can come directly to Kim to get to the board. But if you were going to go through it first to pull out what you wanted to go to the board, I guess I'm just asking what the point of what would be the duties of the point person? Yes. Since it can come directly to Kim to get to the board.
I just think it's a lot to grab, and for everybody to go out and get their own separate ideas and try to come back and try to put it together, it's going to be a convoluted mess. I think by a point person, we can meet with the group, get the ideas, give them to Kim, and then she can say, here's what the research came back with. What do y'all think?
Research from the board? You mean board members are all going to give it to
the point
them?
person meeting with the group.
Yeah, meeting with the experts from the Audubon, the Friends of St. Sebastian River.
Yes, that was work. I just wanted to clarify that it can go directly to Kim, but if that's what you wanted to disseminate and get some of the stuff that you didn't want to consider first, that.
Yeah, I think it's important to get that information, but I think having communication where someone's able to ask questions, where it's a discussion as opposed to just handing over all this information, that was kind of my goal.
And then down the road, we can have a workshop and say, here were my lessons learned, or whatever it may be, and say, this is what we came up with and why. What do y'all think? And in open forum.
Sure. Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so with Mr. Van Hoffman's role, is that something we need to vote on or to approve just before we move forward?
I think you can just do it as a voice vote.
Okay.
A motion and just more of an agreement.
Okay, so all those in approval of Mr. Van Hoffman being kind of the point person with the native plant experts?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Any in opposing? Okay. Okay. We have our homework then, right? Okay. So between now and July, I guess kind of set personal goals, as was mentioned, to kind of come up with a bulleted list of things that we like with the current ordinances and things that we would like to try and address, and have a discussion with our next meeting. Okay, all right.
Like I said, I'd be happy if you just came up with a few suggestions each, emailed them to me before the next meeting. I'd be happy to compile them into a presentation, to kind of make it more cohesive, and we could all discuss
Okay.
it.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
Does anybody know of a place around here that's got quite a bit of native landscaping that would be a good place for us to go and look at?
Native Gardens in Melbourne. That was at our celebration.
Native Gardens.
They have
in
more
Melbourne.
native than
Okay.
anybody. You're not going to find them in Sebastian.
Vero Beach has a botanical society, right?
My name is Janice Broda, 12396 Highway A1A, Vero Beach, Florida. Would you spell your last name? Oh, sorry, B-R-O-D-A. My apologies. Thank you. I'm secretary of the Eugenia chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. I'm a former county extension agent. I served as the multi-county extension agent for the Indian River Lagoon program, and in that capacity, I served on your board, or the prior incarnation of your board, and worked on the prior landscape ordinance. So, Environmental Learning Center is a very nearby place to see mature natives in the landscape. I will be glad to provide information about our chapter meetings. During the summer months, when the day length is long, our chapter meets in members' yards, so you can see natives in the landscape that have been in the landscape for many years, and you can see how they've performed. If there's any interest, I would be glad to give a presentation on native plants, since there seems to be some confusion about what native plants are. And one thing I'd like to point out is that a lot of plants that are used commonly in landscapes are native. Live oaks, magnolias, hollies. So please don't think we're talking about esoteric plants from another universe. And as I was walking in, I did notice you do have some native plants in your landscape here. Before US 1 was redone, the medians that the Florida Department of Transportation put in were all done in natives. There's a garden to the west here that's all native plants. So Sebastian, in the past, has used a lot of native plants in their own landscapes and has encouraged Florida Department of Transportation to do so. So it would be nice to go back to an emphasis on native plants because they work well for a variety of reasons. And if I can be of help in any way, I will be glad to do that. And to Kim, I will forward some information about our meetings if you'd like to see some natives in the landscape live.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments, discussion, questions on that? Okay. We can move to the next item then. Board approval to make the Sustainable Business Initiative, focusing particularly on reducing plastic waste, a primary focus of meetings moving forward as well.
A second.
All those in approval?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. It seems, this was something that I had kind of encouraged a few meetings ago, feels like a long time ago, but maybe in January, trying to come up with a kind of program to encourage businesses to focus on ways that they can become more sustainable. So with Stephanie's presentation of incorporating the commercial recycling, offering to change styrofoam into some kind of a biodegradable, like takeout containers into some other type of substance, going away from single-use straws, plastics, silverware into either some kind of sustainable material or reusable. As we move forward, obviously we're going to have the landscaping ordinance to deal with as well. And I'm assuming it's not too much to try and do both of these at the same time. I think both of them are really important.
I think
Staff recommends, like, we put the material out for the native landscaping ordinance. We have a couple months to review it. It's pretty tedious. I think the goal is that by the next meeting, we'll discuss in depth the the landscaping ordinance, and then I'll provide the material to look over some ideas to shape a sustainable business initiative, a sort of rating system, however we want to do it. There are a lot of ideas out there, and that's a good time, the same way, present a folder of things that we can look through, and then it gives us another month to synthesize, and we can put our thoughts together for it.
Okay, so kind of space this out.
We've got 2 months to come up with some recommendations for the sustainable, the landscape ordinance. We can do that.
We've got ample time.
Staff recommends that if the board focuses its efforts on 2 major initiatives like this, which are big tasks, that and stay on that and bring in guest speakers that facilitate our education in these areas, that we could get a lot more accomplished, for sure.
One of the things that I was hoping with the Sustainable Business Initiative was to make it similar to what we're doing with the landscape ordinance, is to bring in experts, to bring in kind of community partners, whether it's businesses. Ms. Weiss was here a couple months ago and trying to incorporate her expertise and her knowledge and what she can bring to the table. As well as, I know up in Brevard County, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Brevard Zoo and Keep Brevard Beautiful. They actually have an existing program where they're trying to encourage businesses. They will advertise for the businesses, something very similar to what I think we can try and do here in this region as well. If it's okay with everyone else, I would be willing to be kind of the point person and trying to organize with the community members, kind of gather information and try and submit it to Kim so that we have that for the next meeting to review for, I guess it would be August then. Okay?
We've got some material coming from Surfrider Foundation as well, in regards to single-use plastics.
Okay. All right, that'd be great.
They've been doing this for a long time, and no sense in reinventing the wheel if it's already been done.
Yeah. One of the things I've been noticing is that it seems to be there are several ways of approaching this. There's kind of the buy-in approach where businesses are able to say, okay, or a menu approach, I guess I should say, where they kind of can choose from different options that they are willing to kind of take. And then there are some programs where it's all or nothing. So I think that's one of the things that we can kind of talk about once we get more information is how we want to try and approach it for this region, what we think would be most effective. Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions? Oh, is that do we have to move to approve that?
Yeah, just a vote to agree to make that one of your major initiatives going forward.
Okay. Do we have an agreement that this can be one of our major initiatives moving forward?
I second the motion, yes.
Okay. All in approval?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so then moving to old business, we've got our Earth Day, Arbor Day celebration from a few weeks ago. I'm going to turn that over to Ms. Jones.
All right. I would like to begin by congratulating Rose Glasser and the board for their successful Earth Day celebration. It's a lot of fun. It was, despite the threat of rainy weather, we had a beautiful day, just like Rose said it would be. I was like, it's going to rain. She's like, I always have perfect weather. And it was. Despite the many competing local events, there was still a great local turnout. And I especially would like to take a moment to thank the outstanding volunteers that really came in the last minute, and from the Sebastian Charter Junior High School, the Sebastian River High School, and the local Boys and Girls Club. We couldn't have had the event without them, for sure. Going forward with preparations for 2019, we should probably just take a moment to evaluate the event while it's still fresh in our minds. While some board members did assist with preparations for the event, I think it's important to remember that the event is a responsibility of the entire Natural Resources Board. So the staff recommends that it's crucial that each board member sort of take ownership of a specific event task in the future so that all the stress doesn't fall on any one board member. and then it'll be a much more enjoyable and successful event for everyone. And while the staff is here to support the board, we're not essentially the key players. It's your event, and I think this is a good time for us to kind of say anything going forward. Do you think, as board members, that you're comfortable taking on a specific task, like we divide it up, like to deal with vendors, to deal with just the marketing? And it's pretty much, Rose has been organizing it for years. She's got the plan down, but she shouldn't have to have the whole plan to herself. So when it comes to marketing, she has a list of people she contacts. She can hand to you. You just have to do the legwork. And so it's already been so well organized, but if everyone could take a piece and follow that initiative through, you know, starting months before until the day of the event, I think that's going to be crucial. Will everybody feel good about that?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we all owe Rose, and actually, Kim, you know, you did a whole lot of work as well. I mean, both of you were very instrumental in making this happen. I don't know if maybe moving forward, Rose, you might be able to kind of set up maybe 5 or 6 kind of areas that people can take responsibility in.
Very easily.
Okay, that would be great, yeah.
Advertising, children's activities, vendors, food vendors could be separate. It easily could be divided.
She's very well organized machine with this event, but when it comes to the last week, it's a lot of stress, a lot. And
even,
you know, all the board members have jobs and lives, and no one can really give an entire week, every day, every minute to it. So if everyone divided it up, I think it'd be best.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I plan on updating my plans one more time just to have a final, and I'll email to you, Kim, so you can disperse it. I do still have a bicycle. Daria Gibbs, an 11-year-old, was the winner of the bicycle, and I have called her several times. I believe Nikki called her the day of the event, and today I sent out a letter to her. So if I don't get any response from that, we might have to draw a second name.
Should say that again on TV, just to make sure.
The bicycle that
No,
we
the
gave away?
name, Daria Gibbs.
Daria Gibbs, 11 years old, from here in Sebastian. And did you have anything to add to our budget for thank you notes?
Yes, I'm submitting the receipts. It was less than 20 for cardstock and envelopes.
So with that, our budget would be just under $800 for the celebration. And that includes $400 just to the band, so
Pretty
we
good.
did a lot better this year. Last year we spent, I think, $1,000, $1,100.
You know, in the future, some ideas is like some of the activities, there are local groups that would probably sponsor an activity, you know, so like a certain group, like or environmental group could sponsor one activity and they would provide the supplies for it. So if we divide up the responsibilities, these are things that we could really approach and could probably even reduce the cost more, but still make it more successful.
The PA system was, I think, maybe out of date. We had a lot of problems with that, hearing our mayor do the proclamation or the bands. A couple of them brought their own amplifiers, which really helped, but the PA system might have to be looked at some point. Had feedback from a lot of the vendors because I went and saw them a couple times out of the day, and when I handed out the thank you notes, everybody said there were, of course, about 3/4 less people in the park than there was last year, but they all sold enough that they were happy being there and would like to come back again next year. The only negative feedback I had was a concern. I made the mistake of inviting the clown. When I saw her, there was someone with her doing face painting, and that's what I thought I was getting, is face painting. And when she had the rubber balloons, I liked it dyed. And then I heard that Uncle Louis Snow Cones was using styrofoam cups, and I didn't know that. They've been at our event
I didn't know
for
that.
4
Snow
years,
Cones.
I bet. So that's something we need to approach in the future,
always
make
use
sure
a
that
paper
there is
cone.
no styrofoam in the park. And then I was also told that one of the vendors was selling T-shirts, and they were earth-friendly vendor, but they had the T-shirts hanging on plastic hangers. I say they probably use those same plastic hangers at every event for how many years, and it's not a single-use thing. It's kind of...
Maybe.
But those are my only issues that I came with all the vendors, so everybody was very pleased.
And that's why, you know, if one member took on, you know, the retail vendors and one took on food vendors, all those things could be approached, you know, a lot easier.
Even with the fire permit this year, Wednesday I received an email that they had a new application after I'd already sent ours in with the check, and I had to redo it. They needed to know how many and what size of cookers were being used by each vendor, the type of fuel source, and if they were cooking in a trailer or a temporary structure. So
these are all things we need to put on a vendor application now.
So that was something new, and I emailed all the vendors that night and had it sent back into them Thursday morning. I have a couple proclamations from Mayor and Mr. Dobbs. Is that something you would like?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll turn them over to you.
Any other board members have any feedback or?
I'd like to say thanks, Kim. You did great. And Ms. Rose, you did fantastic too. The rest of the board, everybody really chipped in, but you know, your car was packed full and it was 7 o'clock in the morning and you're still printing signs to go here and go there, and everybody was unpacking and doing their thing, and I just wanted to say thank you a lot. Really
It was a little hectic, but it's a lot of fun. I love events like this. As a new staff member, it was a lot of fun to help. But now we have the signs, so we can use them next year.
Okay, then if there's no further discussion, we'll move to the next item. So item B, the role of our Natural Resources Board and the guest speaker schedule. If there are any guest speakers we'd like to kind of provide input toward, any recommendations? I think maybe for the next meeting, it might be nice to have, whether it's Ms. Broda from Native Plants, maybe we can set up someone with Pelican Island Audubon or
I absolutely encourage one of those organizations.
with the native plants and some of the kind of information there. Sound good.
With your business initiative with recycling and everything else, would somebody from the Chamber of Commerce or somebody, would that be beneficial?
I can certainly, I'd be happy to kind of touch base with someone there and see if there's, you know, a point person that might be able to kind of organize with us. Absolutely. Any other recommendations? Okay.
Well, recommendations for guest speakers?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the person from Surfrider Foundation would be good.
Okay.
But I think we should hold off on that one until we get through a little bit more on our landscape ordinance,
Landscaping?
you know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Any other ideas? All right. Then I guess we'll go to member matters. It says here there'll be no meeting, as Kim had mentioned, on Tuesday, June 5th, due to a CRA workshop. So we'll be due to meet the first Tuesday in July. I don't know what day that is. But, okay. I had a quick question for member matters, and Kim, I know I'm trying not to put you on the spot here, but I had seen something in the paper about the new property we had purchased, the Harbor Lights property right next to the dock on Main Street, and I had seen something about there were ideas of potentially putting in a parking lot or, you know, paving it over. Or they weren't sure what they were going to do. Now I know that that's completely. It seemed like conjecture. But one of the things I was very concerned about is we've been paving over a lot of the land very close to the water there with the large dock that we just put across from Riverview. It's not, okay.
That's there are a lot of ideas being thrown in, you know, through the public local newspaper, but that's not a goal of the city at this point with that property.
Okay, all right. Any other member matters?
I'm curious, does, say for example, somebody had a piece of property that they wanted it to remain native, does the city encourage that sort of thing to be donated to the city in a land trust type of thing? Is there any type of land trust like that, or is there anything set up for that?
It involves more than the city, and Mrs. Cheney is an example of that. She's spoken here a few times. She's actually bird watching in Costa Rica, I believe, this week, but she actually purchased land, and it's quite a process to have it as conservation land, because you also have to manage it, which can get costly. And I believe she now has her land is managed by the county. The county actually has an entire conservation lands group led by Beth Powell, and they manage a lot of tracts of land within the city.
I have a matter. It may not be related to the landscaping ordinance and the business initiative. It's really two things. One, I was wondering, with all the activities at Riverview Park, does that put any stress on the trees that are there? Because it seems like we have a lot of events there now, and I didn't know if they could be addressed or not. Just to look at it, if that puts undue stress and pressure on that ecosystem. And the second thing is, I didn't know if we can make that Riverview Park, without doing any damage, more accessible to people with disabilities. And I didn't know, I'd like to get that addressed at some point. That's something I can table, but that is a matter, both of those things.
Absolutely. It's good you mentioned that. We just went 2 weeks ago and did a complete tree inventory with the diameter breast height of literally every single tree in that park. We want to address landscape management of that park for sustainability. And of course, compaction from events is an issue. And that's something we're trying to map out exactly how events can run to reduce compaction. So it is something that we're trying to address right now. So it's definitely a top issue. And I'm sure I don't think we have ever seen Riverview Park as not being handicap accessible. That's absolutely something we expect at the park. So
You were really good about keeping the trucks out. That really helped.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that because there were so many people there in the last few months, and so many different events have been happening. The other part with the people with disabilities was just people with wheelchairs trying to get access through the park from north to south or to the center area without pulling a wheelchair or something like that through the sand.
Apologize because we've just, through Parks and Rec, they are working on a grant right now that's why I was out there doing the inventory, for the widening of the sidewalk and a new sidewalk. So we're addressing how we can widen the sidewalk without putting any stress on the trees, and that's all part of the process of widening the sidewalk to make it more accessible.
Oh, good. I was glad I brought it up. Thank you.
Okay, any further member matters? Okay, we've got the items for the next agenda. We all know our homework with the native landscaping ordinance, and I'll be sure to submit any information I can find on the Sustainable Business Initiative, as well as anything you guys have to add. And I think that is it. Okay. Oh, yeah. All right, we're going to adjourn this meeting then.
Thank you.